How's it going, guys? In today's lessons, we're going to be working with selecting items and all the different types of selection tools. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and open up the folder with your name. Go ahead and create a new folder that says Lesson03. And we're going to double click and I'm going to make a new folder and call it Files Used. Another new folder and call it Working Files. Another new folder, and I'm going to call this one Finished Files. And then I'm just going to arrange them by names. There we go. So under Files Used, I'm going to go ahead and put my Lesson 3 file right here. And then I'm also going to put my Lesson 3 start file under my Files Used. There we go. So notice where I'm putting 03 start. This is under files used. Now a lot of you are putting this one in your finished files or in your working files. That's not where you're supposed to put it. You're supposed to put it under files used. Now we're going to open this up. So double click. It'll open up right here. And I'm actually going to go right away, go to File, Save As, Lesson 3, and just make sure I'm in yes. So instead of Files Used, I'm going to head over to my Working Files. And here, I'm going to go ahead and erase Start and type in Working and put Save as a Photoshop file and click Save. So if I go back over here, under Files Used, I should have the original. And under working files, I should have 03 working. So make sure that is correct. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin our lesson. We now have 03 working, and we're going to go ahead and start working with this particular assignment. So about making selections and the selection tools. Making changes to an area with an image in Photoshop is a two-step process. You first use one of the selection tools to select the part of an image that you want to change. Then you use another tool, filter, or feature to make a change, such as moving the selected pixels to another location or applying filter to the selected area. You can make selections based on size, shape, and color. When a selection is active, changes can be made and applied to that selected area. All other areas are unaffected. What that basically means is that, say for example, if I were to select this and I start, trying to color things over here, nothing gets colored, if you notice, unless I go to that selected area. Other than that, nothing is happening on the outside because it's not selected. So let's go ahead and continue here. So the first thing we're going to be doing is working with our little dollar here, this little thing that looks almost like a tortilla, and we're going to go ahead and select that one. Now, so we can get a better understanding of what we're doing, we're going to grab over here our zoom tool, which is also the letter Z shortcut, and we're going to go ahead and zoom into this particular part right here. Now that we're zoomed in, we're going to go ahead and grab our selection tool, our quick selection tool. So if I leave this pressed, you'll see quick selection. If some of you see a magic wand, something like this, if you leave it pressed, you'll see a quick selection. It should be the fourth one down the line. So quick selection. And then you want to make sure that auto enhanced right here is turned on. So make sure there's a check mark in that specific area. When auto enhanced is selected, the quick selection tool creates better quality selections with edges that are truer to the object. The selection process is a little slower than using a quick selection without auto enhance, but the results are far superior. So click on an off-white area near the edge of the sand dollar. So anywhere near the edge, make sure it's in the white area. And when you click one time, you'll notice that it makes a selection over the entire area. Once you've made a selection, any changes that you make apply exclusively to the pixels within that selection. The rest of the image is not affected by those changes. To move the selected area to another part of the composition, we need to select the Move tool, which is this one up here at the top. You'll notice Move tool, which is also the letter V on your keyboard, and it switches over. If the sand dollar is not still selected, repeat the previous exercise to select it. Zoom out so we can see both the shadow boxes and the sand dollar. So in order to zoom out, you can go ahead and reselect the zoom tool and hold Alt to zoom out, or if you're still selected over here, you can actually press Control minus on your keyboard, and that also zooms out. So now that we have that, with our Move tool selected, which is this one right here, we're going to drag the selected area up into the upper left area of the frame, which is labeled A. Position it over the silhouette in the frame, leaving the lower left part of the silhouette showing as a shadow. So we're going to go ahead and move this up here. And drop it there. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that while this is still selected, you can still move it around to different areas. But once we finally do the next step, which is select and deselect, or pressing Control D, we can no longer move this anymore. We'll move the entire image. So if we were to try to reselect this part and move it again, we're now grabbing the entire image. So what it's doing is we're replacing this pixels with what was originally here, because we're working with only one layer. Before we get into more layers, we're going to keep it simple on this one. So let's go ahead and move over to the next step. So from here, let's just go ahead and go to File and Save. Just in case if anything messes up on the computer, we have the first step already saved. So in this next part, we're going to be working with this guy right here, the one that looks like if it has two little eyeballs, but they're little seashells on a plate. And for this one, we're going to be working with the circle marquee, which should be hidden underneath the rectangle. If you select the rectangle and you leave it pressed, you'll notice the elliptical marquee tool, which is a circle. We'll go ahead and select that one. And so selecting ovals and circles can be tricky. It's not always obvious where you should start dragging, so sometimes the selection may be off-centered or the ratio and width to height won't match what you need. In this exercise, you'll learn techniques to manage those problems, including two important keyboard-mouse combinations that can make your Photoshop work much easier. As you perform this exercise, be very careful to follow the directions about keeping the mouse button and the specific keys pressed. If you accidentally release the mouse button at the wrong time, simply start the exercise again from step 1. So, select the Zoom tool and click on the plates of shells at the bottom of the image window to zoom in at least to 100%. Right here. Select the elliptical marquee tool, which is this one right here, and move the pointer over the plates of the shells and drag diagonally across the oval plate to create a selection. Do not release the mouse button. It is okay if your selection does not match the plate shape yet. So we're just going to click and drag. So notice it's not perfect. You'll see that, if I stretch it out this way, I have a lot of things on the left side that I have not grabbed. So while still holding down the mouse, do not let go, press the space bar. With the space bar, you can now move the selection around. So you can go ahead and position up at the top, let go of the space bar, and then re-stretch it. There we go. Then select and deselect. Sorry. For this next section, we're going to be working with the Magic Wand tool. We're going to first select the Rectangle Marquee tool hidden behind the Elliptical Marquee tool. So we're going to head up here. You should have this one showing the circle. So we're going to go ahead and leave it pressed. We're going to head over to the rectangle. With the rectangle, we're going to actually make a selection that comes across the entire little coral here. But make sure we have enough space down here at the bottom and we have enough space all around. So pretty much don't do something that looks like this because you don't want to cut things off. Don't try to make it perfect because you don't want to cut things off. So what we want to do is make sure that we get enough space all around the little coral. From here, we're going to go ahead and use the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool should be underneath the Quick Selection tool. Once you leave it pressed, you'll be able to see Magic Wand right here. First thing we're going to do is set the tolerance up to 32. The tolerance allows us to make a more sharper selection around the area. So that's why we set it up a little bit higher to 32. And right now, as of right now, if you were to click on the Quick Selection tool, you notice that I will pretty much remove the selection. And that's not what we want to do. So if the selection is right here, we're going to head over up here to the top to where it says Subtract from Selection. And that's going to allow us to subtract the part that is white. So when we click on the white area, we now have a selection over this specific coral, which is exactly what we want to be able to achieve. Now, with that being selected, we're now going to go ahead and grab the Move tool right here. And by holding spacebar, if you're still zoomed in, by the way, by holding spacebar, you notice the little hand pops up. And with that hand, you can actually click and drag so you can move around and see where you need to put selected items. So from here, I'm going to now grab my Move tool and I'll move my coral up here to the top. Make sure that it lands just right so that it looks correct. And then go to Select and Deselect. After we've deselected this part, so now we have this, this, and this, we're going to go ahead and go to File and Save. Make sure that our work is saved up to this point. And then after this, we're going to be going up over to the next step, which is working with the Lasso tool. Now the Lasso tool is going to be in here. It'll be our third tool from here. And our Lasso tool has, if you leave it pressed, we have Lasso, Polygon Lasso, and Magnetic Lasso. Let's go ahead and grab our Lasso tool right here. And we're going to go ahead and zoom in over to our little shell that's down here at the bottom. So I'm just going to move it down here and then zoom in a little bit closer here to around 300%. And then with the Lasso tool, we're going to go ahead and start to select. But we're going to notice the difference between them first. Alright, so with the Lasso tool selected and us zoomed in into our little shell down here at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and just start here at the bottom and just trace as carefully as we can around it. And you'll notice that this is actually a bit hard. So when we get to around this point right here, you can hold Alt on your keyboard and then let go of the mouse. And you'll notice that it now changes to the polygonal lasso tool, which this one creates straight lines. And make sure you do not let go of Alt. If you do, just repeat the process again from the beginning. And with this one, you can just go click, 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 all the way around until you can kind of create the best selection around this. And so we're going to do this, just click, click, and go all the way around selecting our shell. And remember, don't let go of Alt, leave it pressed. And once we get over here to the beginning, you'll notice that you get kind of like this little Oh yeah, so once we're here at the very beginning, you can now let go of Alt, and it'll make a selection around the entire thing. And it kind of curves out as best as it can. Now that we have this selected, if you notice that there's any parts like this that are kind of missing, you can just go ahead and hold Shift, and you can just come in here and color that in, and then Shift and color that in. And then Alt, you can kind of deselect some of these parts. There we go, because this is getting too much. And there we go. So now we have a pretty decent selection from there. So the next thing that we're going to do is heading on to the next step is rotating our selection. So the way we're going to do that is by holding down, by actually going up to Edit and then Transform, free transform right here. And so one of the things you want to keep in mind while doing this is to make sure that you're holding Shift while rotating. If you don't hold Shift, it'll just rotate however it wants to. But if you hold Shift, you'll be able to have it like kind of lock into certain positions. And we want to do a complete 90-degree turn with this pointing down. And then we're going to go ahead and zoom out and move this one up here to the letter D. There we go. And then press OK. And then we're going to select and deselect. And there we go. So now we only have the letter E that's missing here. So before we go over to the letter E, let's go ahead and go to File and Save. So for the letter E, we're actually going to be working with the magnetic lasso tool, which is hidden underneath our lasso tools. And we have our magnetic lasso tool. So doing Control plus, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and press spacebar to come down here and zoom in to my shell that's right here. And now using the lasso tool, I'm going to go ahead and just click one time and stay as close as I can to the lines. And the way the lasso tool works is that it tries its best to select the edges. So notice here I started to go wrong and it started putting dots somewhere else. If I just press delete on my keyboard, it'll go back to that original last point that it had made. So you want to stay as close as you can to the edge, and you'll see that it starts selecting things for you. So right here at the corner, I can just press myself one time and it makes its own point. And just keep going until we get all the way around. There we go. So now we have a selection here. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom out, grab my move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and move this over right here to the top, and then select and deselect. So that is how you use the magnetic lasso tool. So now we've covered over the lasso tool, polygon, and magnetic. Lasso tool, you have to draw it yourself, which can be very complicated. Polygon tool, you do straight lines, which could be a lot easier. And magnetic tool just kind of sticks to those edges all on its own. We also have the quick selection, which would just grab everything that looks as close as possible. And the magic wand tool, which also selects things that are all the same color. So these are different types of selections. We've also used the rectangle and the elliptical selection tool. So I hope you guys have been learning quite a few. And so then the last thing we're going to be doing is selecting this little screw that's down here. And we're going to use the what's it called? The elliptical tool to select this one. And so what you want to do here is go ahead and just switch over to our elliptical tool. And we're going to zoom in right here, move it over. And we're just going to kind of drag here. So for this one, since it's a perfect circle, you want to hold Shift as you're doing this, and Shift will give you a perfect circle. and you can actually just make it a little bit smaller, hold spacebar and move it around. Remember, don't let go of shift, and then once you're done selecting it with spacebar, you can go ahead and deselect. So now we have a pretty good selection here, but we're actually going to do something a little bit different with this guy, because we actually need to make sure that we can make copies of him. So we're going to grab our move tool, and we're going to go ahead and bring this guy over to the corner up here. And then zoom in. And you'll notice he's a little bit big, so we're going to go to Edit and Transform, or Free Transform actually. And now holding Shift and holding Alt at the same time, it'll allow us to kind of scale it down to the anchor point in the center. And we're going to put it just enough to where it fits somewhere there. That looks pretty decent. And we're going to click OK. Now notice that our selection is still made. If you no longer have the selection, you might want to retrace your steps and continue again from the beginning. So while the selection is still made, by holding Alt on our keyboard, you'll notice that our mouse now turns into a black and white mouse. And we're going to go ahead and select from there. Hold Shift as you're doing that. So, sorry, I don't think I set the step. As we're holding Alt, make sure Alt is pressed, and then drag down. And while you're dragging down, make sure Alt is still pressed, and you hold Shift to keep it straight. And we're going to go ahead and place that there. And we're going to go Alt again, Shift, and move this one up here. Alt again, and then hold Shift and put this one up here. Now we can go to Select and Deselect. Make sure we save our work. And so now we have a pretty good selection, a pretty good image here that we have to work with. Now the very last step that we're going to be doing is cropping this image. So what cropping means essentially is we have all this leftover stuff that we do not want in the picture. So by coming up here to our crop tool, this one right here, we can now crop in to just what we want. So we're going to go ahead and leave a little bit of white at the edges, just like so, and bring this one up. Actually, we're just going to put it as close as we can as possible. There we go. Right there. Right there. Right there. And zoom in a little bit more. And right there. There we go. So once we have our selection, we can just press OK. And now we have our little board here that we can save one more time. File, save. Make sure it's still saved as working. And since this is our finished product, we're now going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to switch over from working over to Lesson 3, and we're going to go over to Finished Files. We're going to switch this over to a JPEG. Remember, it's the first JPEG. And then we're going to erase everything that's here and put this as finished. And then go ahead and save your work and click OK. And that is it for this tutorial, guys. I hope you guys managed to understand this a little bit better with my video, and you guys following along with my video. I will have some questions for you guys that you will use the Lesson 3 file for you all to review. And once you're done with those questions, you're free and you're done with this lesson. Again, thank you guys so much for following along, and I hope this works better and helps you understand the lesson a bit better. See you guys on the next one.